welcome you to the Regional Beach Nourishment Project for Kahana Bay. It's really hard for me to even see. Progress report on erosion mitigation study and stakeholder update on options for regional beach nourishment. So we're going to focus on the regional beach nourishment today. The reason we had this meeting at this time is because the Army Corps of Engineers from Honolulu District, Milton Yoshimoto, Tom Smith, and Lauren, I don't know your last name? Huh? Molina. Laura Molina. Lauren were able to come and present some of their programs, and they could be a major partner if we choose in helping study, understand the regional beach nourishment pieces, as well as some possible funding for the project also. So this is, the first part will be a good education, outreach, information sharing session, but let's keep it as a interactive session, because we do want to move from education, information sharing to beginning planning. I don't know how much we'll get here, but at the end, after the information is shared, Q&A, there will be time for interaction here. What we like to do is to look at beginning an incipient planning process here. So I have some slides in terms of strategic planning session and some outcomes that we would like to. I'll put that up at the end, so at the last hour we can go through that. So Tom and Milton and Lauren will be presenting part of the session. I'll just go through the agenda real quickly. Most of you hopefully got the agenda. I guess I have it in here too, but what I'll do is I'll set the stage. We will go around, we'll introduce the audience and talk about the conclusions from a study that we did this February through April in terms of looking for sand offshore here. So we have some good results to report out to you. As far as the Moffett Nickel, Rising Tide Engineering, Royal Kahana effort off here. Then we will shift to project partnership with Milton Yoshimoto, Tom Smith from the Army Corps of Engineers to talk about their Section 103 program funding, and they have been doing some studies out here, and they can give you some findings that they have concluded, and talk about further partnership with all of us. And then we'll take a break. After that, we can look at the planning process for moving forward. If we do choose to do regional beach nourishment out here, what are the steps from today through implementation? So we can outline that all for you. And then we can conclude in the last hour with, hopefully with the condos and representatives here. I know everyone can't be here on short notice such as this, but take it back to their boards of directors, and we can continue to communicate in terms of getting some formal planning organization moving forward on the project. So Tara, maybe you can flip through a few. So anyway, this is a picture of Kahana Beach, September 2015, and maybe the next one here, a nice beach profile out in front of Royal Kahana. And then, so that was in September we had that. And at the time, remember, we came in August. We had planning meetings in May. We had planning meetings on August 5th. We had one November 13th. Well, in August, we're saying we need to begin looking at regional beach nourishment. We need to begin planning. It is urgent. The situation is coming to the point where we need to get our act together. So this was September, and then Tara flipped to the next one here. This was in April, January, February, March, April. For folks on YouTube who weren't here during the winter, we lost our beach. We had severe erosion. Hololani next door with the sandbags kind of sort of maintained But really, this property here the 400 feet in front here, and down to Valley Isle, the next two, were hit very severely by the erosion, the large El Nino waves. So obviously, the planning aspect takes on another level of urgency now, and that's why we're here today. So to begin my comments, to set the stage, what the project goal here is to design and implement a regional erosion control solution for Kahana Bay that protects the built environment and enhances the natural shoreline environment. Okay, we're attempting to do both. Okay, there's a tendency now with chronic erosion to protect our development and impact the environment at the consequence of impacting our environment, our shoreline. So through regional beach nourishment, can we do both? Can we adequately protect all of the 9 condos here in Kahana Bay and have a nice, healthy beach? So we're looking for healthy development, healthy structures, and a healthy ecosystem. So that's a very high level, visionary goal to shoot for through this project. Who we're talking about here are the 9 condos. I don't know if you know them all, from north to south, plus we have 3, I don't know if you call them outliers, or there are 3 on the back side here, the manor, the villas, and the falls, the Kahana Manor, Kahana Villas, Kahana Falls, who are behind, who use the beach. They are stakeholders, but they don't have frontage here. So we would love to include them in the project also. To the north, Kahana Village, Kahana Outrigger. Moving to the south, Kahana Reef. Kahana Outrigger has some rock revetment out front. Kahana Reef has a seawall out front. Pohailani, next door to Hololani, has a seawall. Hololani, Royal Kahana, where we are, Valley Isle, Sands of Kahana, and Kahana Beach. And again, my name is Jim Buika of County of Maui Planning Department.
I'm Tara Owens, a coastal geologist with the University of Hawaii Sea Grant Program, and I serve the county as a technical advisor on coastal processes related issues.
Tom Smith, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Honolulu District. I'm a coastal engineer and technical lead on this study.
Lauren Molina, coastal engineer with the Army Corps of Engineers.
I'm Milton Yoshimoto. I'm with the Army Corps of Engineers in Honolulu, Civil Works. I'm managing the core effort here at Kahana.
Keith Scott with the County Planning Department.
Talking about in terms of regional beach nourishment. We keep throwing this term around. I thought it would be good to at least put it into words, and we can talk about this later. So a regional project spanning from Kahana Stream down to S-turns would be the scope, right? That in the last, go back to that last slide, Tara, just to show. So the scope would be pretty much where the yellow bracket is there. So that's considered the Kahana beach cell in terms of a physical beach cell right there. Okay, so that's the length. So what would be involved would be re-nourishing the beach with approximately, on the low end, 50,000 cubic yards of sand to 100,000 cubic yards of sand that would be dredged from the near shore in an environmentally sound manner and placed along 10 contiguous parcels from S-turns Park to Kahana Stream. With potentially multiple rock groins, likely with a T-head configuration to contain the sand out there. So a 50,000, we do have a picture of the conceptual picture of what it would look like, and we'll go into that in a few minutes. So the regional project, so to get there, to implement something like this at the low end 50,000, high end 100,000 cubic yards, it would be, we would need to complete an environmental impact statement with all of the needed studies and engineering drawings, some modeling to understand what if we did put out groins in a T-head fashion, what the best configuration would be. Involve all of you. The EIS process would involve many public meetings, gaining public input on this. And then all the way to planning, permitting, design, and construction. So it would be all the way through. So that's what the regional project involves. So just in terms of ballpark figures, a 50,000 cubic yard concept here would bring the beach out about 50 feet, 54 feet, I think, in the conceptual drawing from where it is now. A 100,000 would bring it out to about 110 feet away from the current shoreline. So basically, we have our development and our shoreline over time. As when development came in, the shoreline has been getting closer and closer to our development. The regional beach nourishment would bring it back to maybe 50 years ago, where we would move the shoreline physically away from the development, maybe 100, 110 feet. We could even add additional sand because we do have the sand we need. So these are some aerial photos. This is 1949. So again, kind of this regional beach nourishment project is envisioned to create a robust, healthy shoreline as we had back in 1949. Maybe not as much, but it would, this is kind of the vision that we have here. And then you can see moving from 1949 to 1975, you can see the development is starting. I think this building right here, if you look closely at the Royal Kahana, Terry, you can point that out there, huh? Maybe, Royal Kahana.
Royal Kahana
Valley Isle are done. The Kahana Beach is done on the end, and then Pohailani and the Kahana Reef are constructed. So 1975, right when they were being constructed. So we still have pretty much beach, no seawalls out front, and then we move to 20 years later, 1997. You can see the beach is narrowing. We have Kahana Reef that put in a seawall. They lost their beach. Pohailani put in a seawall. They lost their beach out front. And then the beach is a little narrower as we come down on all sides. So there is that chronic erosion over time, about 0.7 feet per year, and various storms and the development. So the interaction between the human beings and the shoreline have changed the shoreline to today's present condition. So just to report out, last time we were here in August, we were soliciting the condos here to match what the county council funds had become available. We were able to lobby, I know some of you, we lobbied through the county council process to gain $320,000 to do a sand study and a initial configurations for what a regional beach nourishment, some ideas for what a regional beach nourishment would look like. So that the one-year study would evaluate a regional beach nourishment solution by looking at only two pieces of it, really assessing alternative structural configuration out here to hold the sand and investigating potential offshore sand availability. If there's no sand, we didn't have much option really for recreating the beach. So that we did get the 160K with the proviso to match it. Royal Kahana, through their work, were able to match it. Soft match, they had been out there working and had discovered some sand. We were able to use that, all the work that had been done by Royal Kahana to release that 160K. We contracted in February with Moffitt and Nickel, engineering company from Honolulu and Long Beach, California, and they did this study. So we're here to report out on that, and I can share that with you. The preliminary results are in. We have a preliminary study, and we're giving them 2 more months to finalize the study. So by August 31st, the findings from the sand study and the initial regional beach nourishment configuration will be available for all of you. Terry, you want me to keep going, or you want to talk about this? Okay, I'll keep going here. So what did they do? What did we get for our 160K? We got 25 miles of a survey lines. They surveyed the entire area from here. Here's where we are over here, all the way down through Honokavai area, looking for large sand areas. There were many studies done. The Corps of Engineers had done some regional sediment management studies. There have been a couple of environmental assessments in the area, so all of the available information and data were put into this to look for sand deposits close by that would match the beach sand. Where did all this beach sand go from 1949? Where did it go? It went right offshore here, and we found it. So we did 25 miles of, why don't you go back to that one? For the scientists in the audience, we did sub-bottom survey tracks. We took beach samples. They did vibrocores, where they actually cored the sand areas. They did jet probes, where they did grab samples. And then they looked in this area where the sand was. You can see the track, very detailed. So they are able to understand the soft sand area and the hard rock bottom or old reef bottom underneath that. So that was the area of concentration. So it's very close by, right off of S-turns right here, and then the bluff area north of Honokavai area. Thanks, Tara. So the results were much better than expected, and we can hand this out here. Here's the sand sample. You want to grab it and pass it around? It's beautiful sand. We found beautiful, clean, beach quality sand. We were hoping for 50 grand. We were dreaming 50,000 cubic yards. We were dreaming for 100,000 cubic yards. We found 405,000 cubic yards of beach quality sand. So, and the best part about it is, here's where we are. Again, the Royal Kahana area. These two areas, the big blue areas there, they do have some contouring to them. These are, we found sand deposits less than half a mile away in about 15 feet of water. 71,000 cubic yards of sand is available there. 14 acres, average thickness is about 3 feet, 3.1 feet. Another very near shore sand deposit 22, area 22 has 205,000 cubic yards of beach quality sand, 28.5 acres, average thickness is 4.5 feet thick, and in 12 feet deep of water. So it's very accessible, it's very close, and there isn't a coral head in sight. It is, as the consultant said, it's like the Saharan desert out there. It's beautiful. If you go out there, I'm sure many of you have gone out there in these sandy bottom areas. I've gone out there with the Corps of Engineers and some of the consultants and looked at the sand, and it's beautiful. So it's very, very near shore. So the project is doable. If we construct it, the good thing about it is that if we begin to lose sand over time through big storms or whatever, we have the potential to re-nourish it, to maintain it, because we have an adequate near-shore sand supply that could be brought up in a dredge fashion with barges in a very environmentally friendly way. So we could recreate a beach area out here that once was here at one time. What's happened through time, as many of you have lived out here, know the big storms come in, the sand gets carried in the water column, and obviously a lot of it has been going off in channels and settling very close out of the wave action zone in those deposit areas. So those are the two close areas at 275,000 cubic yards of sand. This is we did sample, we took sand samples from the beaches, we took sand samples from those offshore sand areas, and we have some state criteria for what beach sand quality is. And I guess the offshore sample falls within the criteria for the beach here. So, and I'm passing it around if someone wants to take a look at
our
the sand.
State Department of Land and Natural Resources has guidelines for what constitutes compatible sand. Because you don't want to put sand on a beach that's not compatible with the native sand. So this basically just shows that the offshore sand falls within the guidelines. And there's actually some photographs, underwater photographs there comparing the offshore sand that you're passing around in the bag to the native beach sand. So the quality is good, and it is a good match to the sand that's on the beach.
So we're in luck. So good. These are some conceptual pictures of the restoration concepts that Moffett and Nickel put together. They're conceptual. They have not been modeled, and what we would do in an EIS or part of the big picture, potentially with the Corps or otherwise, would be to model everything off of here and look at the wave regime, the sand, the bottom topography, etc., the biology out here, and look at what would be the most effective type of groin field or that would maintain the beach out here and get all of you involved and try to figure it out. What they did is they conceptualized some T-head groins that are used universally around the world to contain sand, be low-lying, low-level groins off here. And what they did for the 50,000 cubic yards, the top picture here is to construct groins at the TMK boundaries of most of the properties. I think one or two are together. I think Valley Isle and Royal Kahana don't have one in between, but you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like there's a terminus groin field down there at the end of S-turns to hold some of the sand in, a little beyond the area, and one up here at Kahana Village. So that was a conceptual idea for 50,000 cubic yards. They would be a little over 100 feet, 100 and I forget the exact length. Do you have the profiles in here? Did you put the profiles there or no? Okay, so I think it's a little over 100 feet out from the beach, and then there would be about a 50 feet worth of dry beach out in front all the way along. So we would overload the system so that we would have, even in front of the seawalls, we would have
It leads me to want to disclaim this here. These are very conceptual in nature, so it's just to give you an idea of how a restored beach might be accomplished. Now, there would be a lot more work that would go into the exact length of these groins, the spacing of these groins, the orientations of the T-heads, the cross-section or profile of them, and that would all have to be done through the EIS and the planning process and the modeling, and then hopefully it would involve you all as stakeholders in terms of making choices about exactly which configuration works best in terms of not only successfully rebuilding a beach, but successfully rebuilding a beach that's desirable to the community and then filled with sand. And then there is always the question about what is the life cycle of the project. If we spend the time and the effort and the money to put 50 or 100,000 cubic yards on the sand on the beach, how long will it last? When the final project design is, we're approaching a final project design, the engineers will be able to give us some sense of what the life cycle is. But you hope a project will be 10, 15 years in its life before you have to do another maintenance cycle of dredging and putting sand back on the beach. And the idea behind beach renourishment, right, is we're losing sand to the near shore. And then we're recycling it. We're doing this process of recycling it back onto the beach. It's not a one-time thing, typically. It's something you plan to do and maintain over the long term. And we'll have to figure out what that cycle, that maintenance cycle would be.
Are you going to model that?
Yes, yeah, a lot more modeling will be done for the design, and then whoever does the final designs, whichever engineering consulting firm that is, will be able to give us a good sense of what that lifespan will be. Based on the current conditions and the erosion rates and the width of beach that's recreated and the volume of beach that's recreated, all those factors, which we really still haven't determined.
Look at that also. So.
Thank you.
Okay. So I have a couple more, just talk about the Hololani decision here, Tara, when you click. Okay, so we've showed that there. Okay, so go ahead, next one, yeah. So again, what Tara was just saying, our coastal erosion problem here, the problem is our existing development is now threatened and requires a solution, right? So we're seeking a solution. Older condos, were built too close to the ocean and are now vulnerable to coastal hazards. It's not only happening here, it's happening in other places also. We do have a long-term chronic erosion rate of 0.7 feet per year that has led to narrowing of the beaches, as Tara just explained. And then we have these episodic seasons and erosional events, just as we had from January to April, that we have to deal with on top of it. So when our big white sandy beach that did protect, and it did protect these condos, our condos for many years, right? We didn't have this problem until more recently. So the sandy beach does perform in a protective manner here. And we are having seawall failures very commonly. Honokavai, Halama Street, this area we've had, 13. Keith and myself, Tara, have been responding to failing seawalls. So the seawalls aren't necessarily the panacea also, or these revetments. They're failing around the islands, and we're trying to remediate these also. So we have this chronic problem going on. This is the picture of Hololani recently.
No, this is back in 2007.
2007, okay.
Originally written.
Okay, 2007. Go ahead. And this is the artist's rendering of the seawall revetment that is planned for Hololani in this area here, with some sand in front of it. So this is I wanted to share a profile cross-section of the project. And this has been approved conditionally by the Maui Planning Commission on June 14th. And what this is so the property would be on the left-hand side. There would be a seawall, a plate that would be driven into a stainless steel plate driven, this long column here, 12 feet above sea level, 10 feet deep. The shoreline, the approximate shoreline is where that blue arrow is, up and down there. It varies, it undulates along the shoreline here, but part of the and then a revetment of rocks would be, there would be a flat top 5 feet, then it would go down, and it would be buried. The mean sea level, MSL, is mean sea level. So this would be buried from 1 foot to 6 feet below sea level, offshore here in this area. So that's the concept for the Hololani seawall. That's what the profile looks like. It's about, from the seawall to the toe of the revetment is about 20 feet. So it is in the area where the sandbags are currently right now. And it would be digging down 5 feet below to build in that toe. So that is the proposed structure, and the range of it would be from Hohailani, leaving a 15-foot gap, which is an easement for the county drainage, 370 feet to about 30 feet from the end towards the Royal Kahana property. And then on that last 30 feet, there would be a drape of those tensar mattresses with the gravel, the plastic mattresses, right to the Hololani boundary over there. So that's the project that has been approved by the Maui Planning Commission. And there were some conditions that were put on it, because we had 2 meetings on April 26th and June 14th. The County of Maui Planning Department recommended to the Maui Planning Commission for deferral of this action and this project until we understood the availability of sand and the regional beach nourishment as a preferred alternative to building this seawall revetment. So they did defer it temporarily. We met again June 14th, but they asked us to, and at that meeting we shared some preliminary results of the sand survey of what we had found. And we talked about the regional beach nourishment option. The county did. And so at the April 26th meeting, the commissioner asked us to craft some conditions for approval. They understood that Hololani needed to be protected, and it was a bad situation where the building was threatened. So they did approve it with these conditions, that 1. So the approval includes conditions for mitigation of impacts, including that the Hololani shall contribute actively and financially to a regional beach restoration project. And Hololani has agreed to do that. So hopefully that information is being communicated to the Hololani unit owners. So there is, it's not that they have to contribute all of the cost, but at least 1/9 or 1/10, or basically their pro rata share, or how to figure that out. But they are committed financially to helping fund the Regional Beach Nourishment Project. The second condition is that at the time when the Regional Beach Nourishment Project is implemented, the hybrid seawall revetment shall be dismantled and removed by the Hololani. So they said, yes, you can put it in if you contribute to Regional Beach Nourishment actively and financially, and when the beach nourishment out in front of Hololani is completed, you will be required, as a condition of the permit, to remove the seawall. The third is that public access must be provided and maintained both to the shoreline and along the beach transit corridor and across the lawn with this big revetment out front. If there is no beach out front, then people will be able to have a path across. Okay, before I introduce Milton Yoshimoto from the Honolulu district, I'd like to publicly thank the Corps of Engineers for being a good partner with the Maui County for many years now. They understand the shoreline quite well. There are many people who have been studying the shoreline. There are many important studies that they have done, West Maui included, and it was because of Tom Smith, the guy with the long hair here, who came out early on and kind of formed up the original project that we were able to take to the mayor to get some funding to look for the sand. So their early intervention, early work, and scoping of the project has been very beneficial and has helped us jumpstart the project. And Milton Yoshimoto has been out here. He did present in November before all of the nasty erosion happened this past winter. And I think we thank you again for being here, and they offered to come and present again just so that we fully understand the scope of their potential partnership and program here for looking at the options for Kahana Bay here. So turn it over to Milton. You can introduce the rest of the team.
Sure. Again, my name is Milton Yoshimoto. I'm with the Corps of Engineers Honolulu District Civil Works Program. We have Tom Smith, who's our lead coastal engineer with the Corps, and Lauren Molina, who's just finishing up her Department of Army internship and will be joining Tom on his staff with our technical group at the Corps, supporting civil works. Let me start by thanking the Royal Kahana again for hosting us, and you folks. I recognize a lot of you from back in November. You know, what I'm going to cover today is not new. It's a lot of what we said in November. We are going to be able to speak a little bit about our continuing authorities cap sheet or recon work that we've completed since the last time we've met. Let me first start by kind of giving you a general overview of the Corps Civil Works Program. So the Corps Civil Works Program develops water resource projects in partnership with state and local partners. In this case, the County of Maui. And that's very important to clarify up front that in this particular case, should the county decide to request the Corps' assistance with this project, that the project proponent is the County of Maui. All too often, we show up, and this is not Jim always shows up at all of our meetings, but all too often with projects around the state or in the territories, we're the only ones to show up at the public meeting, and all of a sudden it becomes a Corps of Engineers project. So I just want to clarify up front that we are here at the request of the County of Maui based on a letter from Mayor Arakawa requesting our assistance. And I understand that we are one of a couple of options that the county is looking at in terms of pursuing the resolution of the erosion problem here at Kahana. So this started again by a letter from our call requesting that the Corps take a site visit out here, look at the conditions, and basically let them know whether there's anything that we can do to help with one of our authorities. So that said, we came out here. I believe Debbie Solis, for those of you that know Debbie, was the project manager at that time, came out here and said, yeah, I think we have an authority that we could help you with. That authority is the Continuing Authorities Program, which I'm going to brief you on today. The Corps has two ways of approaching our water resource projects. Through our small project authority, Continuing Authorities, which is what we're going to be talking about today. It's a standing authority that's funded annually by Congress. We can address issues such as navigation, storm damage reduction, flood control, ecosystem restoration through this authority. There is a statutory limit for each of these authorities, meaning the federal government cannot contribute beyond a certain amount of money towards the planning, engineering, and construction of the project. For this particular erosion problem, we're looking at Section 103 of the Continuing Authorities Program, which has a limit of $5 million that the federal government can contribute towards the solution. So let me go through some of these slides and then give you guys a better idea of what you may be getting into, and then I'll kind of open it up for questions. So again, the Continuing Authorities Program is a standing authority that's funded annually by Congress. The other authority that I didn't mention is our investigation program, or specifically authorized program, where we construct some of our bigger projects such as harbors. And there's no federal limit on the funding on that, but it needs to be authorized by Congress. So it's a much more cumbersome, longer process than the CAP authority. And the good thing about the CAP authority is we can assist in a relatively short amount of time, although you do need to go through a very prescribed process to get to that point. The CAP Authority project gets started, as I mentioned, with a request from the sponsor, in this case Maui County, requesting our assistance. It doesn't need congressional authorization. The projects are authorized at our division level, which is located on Oahu. It's quicker to implement. Limited scope, so it's designed to address smaller scale projects. Let me give you another example. We built Kahului Harbor way back 100 or so years ago, or had a hand in building Kahului Harbor. That was under a congressionally authorized authority where we contributed millions of dollars towards the development of the project. We would never be able to do something like that under a CAP authority because of the scope of the project. Again, the federal cost limits, and it doesn't compete for funding with our specifically authorized projects that are authorized by Congress. In other words, we don't compete with projects around the country for construction funding or design funds. Okay, eligibility requirements. In order for the Corps to participate, we need to identify a plan with a federal interest. And this is what a lot of people have a hard time understanding. I heard a lot of discussion this morning about beach nourishment. And for those of you that attended the last meeting in November, you might remember I said that if you go through the Corps process, we need to look at a full range of alternatives. We can't just narrowly focus in on beach nourishment, although beach nourishment will be one of the plans that we look at. In order for us to participate, we need to show a federal interest in whatever plan the federal government recommends. Federal interest means that the benefits accruing to the project need to be at least equal or greater to the cost of the project. And when I say benefits, again, this is a little bit difficult to understand, but we call it national economic development benefits, or benefits accruing to the nation, because this is the federal government, and it's taxpayer dollars that are going to fund our share of the project. It has to benefit the nation as a whole. So we have very specific criteria that our core economists use in terms of quantifying the benefits accruing to the project. The second bullet, it must be a complete project. So we wouldn't enter this with the idea of doing a technical study or just going to design and finishing up design and turning it over to the county. It's a complete planning, design, and construction project. And we need to have a cooperating local sponsor, in this case, Maui County. Now, what do we bring to the table? We bring 65% of the cost of the project. That would be for design and construction. For the feasibility study, where we actually do the federal interest determination and the NEPA document, we'll bring 50% of the cost of that. So the cost to the county will be 50% of the study, 35% of design, and 35% of construction. Again, our funding limit is $5 million, so any cost be above $5 million on the federal side is 100% local.
Can you explain, you said NEPA document, what is the NEPA document?
NEPA is the National Environmental Protection Act, which requires that an EIS or EA be done whenever federal money is spent on a project. As Jim mentioned, you know, there's likely going to have to be an EIS associated with this project, and that will be part of our feasibility phase study. So it'll be a feasibility study and a NEPA document, whether it be an EA or EIS. Okay, these are some of the authorities, CAP authorities, and some of the types of projects that we can address under the continuing authorities. Section 14, which is emergency stream bank and shoreline erosion. Section 103, which is what we're going to be using for Kahana Bay. Section 107 is for navigation. 111 for shoreline erosion damage that results from a federal project. I'm not familiar with 145. I don't think we've done any as a district. 205, we've done some flood control. 206, aquatic ecosystem restoration. And 1135 basically is the same as 206, but associated with the core project. Degradation of the environment caused by an existing core project. Again, the CAP projects are small projects. It's a very clear, we have a very clear understanding of the problem going in. Obviously, we have a limited amount of funds to address, so it's very important that the complexity of the project be on a very small scale compared to our congressional projects. And simple solutions. You know, we do watershed studies or projects where we have multiple partners and we're looking at erosion or flooding in the watershed, all the way down to, let's say, Hilo Harbor, which we've done a watershed study for in the past. CAP studies are very simple. The problem is very easily identified, and we make the best use of our $5 million in terms of the planning, engineering, and construction solution. There's a two-phase process to getting a core project constructed. The feasibility phase, which we're in right now, is the study phase where we determine whether there's a federal interest in moving forward to design and construction. So the first $100,000 of the feasibility phase is all federal. And with that $100,000, we produce the CAP fact sheet, and I briefed you on this in November. That was something that was being worked on. This is the initial federal interest. So we came out here, did a site visit, collected whatever data was available, and said there's a reasonable assumption that there will be a federal interest moving forward in our cost-shared feasibility study to continue on. So the CAP fact sheet resulted in a recommendation of continued study. There is a federal interest, and now it's up to Maui County to say they're interested in partnering with the Corps and entering into an agreement if they want our continued assistance. The second phase is the design and implementation phase. So once there's a federal interest, the feasibility study is approved by our division. We go to plans and specs. We get design money. Initially, it's cost shared at a 75 to 25 ratio, 75 federal. Once we go to construction, we recoup 10% in this particular authority because we pay 65%. So ultimately, Maui County ends up paying 35% of the design cost to our 65. And then for construction, again, we'll pay 65% of the construction cost. Okay, so beach erosion, storm damage, section 103. The authority that we're using here to address the conditions here at Kahana Bay, again, has a $5 million statutory limit. And it needs to protect private and public property. We can't just protect private property. So when we're doing our study, we need to look for private infrastructure that will also benefit from our project. And that will be part of the study process that we go through. It's basically a 2 to 3 year process, again, cost shared by the county. If everything goes well, there's a federal interest, we're all in agreement on a plan, then we move forward to design. I wanted to say one thing about beach nourishment, and I said this back in November, about going through the entire process. Even if the federal recommended plan is not beach nourishment, there's still an opportunity for the county to either buy up to beach nourishment if the recommended plan is a less cost, or pursue beach nourishment as a lower cost alternative with appropriate justification. I mean, if the county says, well, the federal government recommends this plan, beach nourishment is the lesser cost plan, we just can't afford the recommended plan, then as long as it meets our federal interest criteria, the BC ratio that I mentioned before, the federal government can still participate in cost sharing for a lesser alternative. If it's a higher cost alternative than what we recommend, the federal government will participate up to the federal plan, and then the county will pay 100% of the difference.
So Milton, it might be helpful to clarify. So you'll look at alternatives. So for example, one alternative could be that you armor all of the properties, right? Or what would be another alternative besides beach renourishment?
Well, I would defer to Tom, but
Okay.
you know, we
Just
would,
conceptually, you know.
yeah, we would look at hardening the shoreline. We would look at, we're also required to look at a no action alternative. You know, what can be done, whether it be relocation of properties or what have you, hardened shoreline or beach nourishment.
And then the benefit cost of all of those.
Right. So we'll cost out each alternative. Our economists will look at whatever benefits accrue to each alternative, and whichever has the greatest amount of net benefits, that it benefits greater than cost, would be what the federal government recommend for it.
Would that be total of the federal contribution, or does that represent 65% of the cost of the project?
It's probably a little bit of both. So we cost share the feasibility study at a 50-50. Design and construction is 65-35. But all that is wrapped up into the $5 million limit. So $5 million is the extent of what we can contribute for planning, design, and construction.
So that'd be the total federal contribution, not
Right.
the total cost.
So you would add on the local contribution in terms of the total project cost.
Will you tell me how long does it take you to do this, the findings, and when would they be out?
First of all, we haven't been asked to continue our involvement. Once we sign a partnership agreement and local funding is available, the study process, depending on what kind of NEPA document we need to produce, and it takes 2 or 3 years to produce an EIS on average. So I would say for planning purposes, 2 to 3 years for the study in NEPA, another year or 2 for design, and then construction. And construction would depend on what it is we're constructing. So, you know, I was here, was it April, Jim, when I briefed the council?
Yes.
I was here in
May. Yeah, May. Oh, in April.
Yeah, I was here in April, and I
2016.
and I did a similar briefing for the county council. And the plan at that time was to initiate a study this fiscal year, before the end of this fiscal year, because we had some money we could get. Unfortunately, and maybe Jim can speak towards this, you know, the local money didn't materialize. So we're at a point now where, you know, we're waiting for somebody at the county or somebody in, you know, discussion with the county to say local money will be available. We want to move forward with a cost share agreement. So we haven't put any funds towards developing a project management plan yet, because we don't know yet if we're going to move forward. And once somebody tells us we're committed, we're gonna, you know, provide the year 1 money, tell me how much, then we'll develop that plan and tell you exactly how much the entire study will cost, and we'll break it down by year. So it'll be clear how much each year the local share will
But
be.
it's fair to say it's something less than 750, approximately.
I would say yes, and the reason is that because this is not a congressional study, our division has some latitude in terms of the level of detail and the type of information that they would approve or authorize for design and construction. So I would say if anything, it would likely be less than the 1.5 and 750 local.
Thank you.
And we will try our best to keep it as low as possible, obviously, from the federal interest side as well as the county side.
Do we need all that money up front? Excuse me, do we need all that money up front? That 500, 600, 750?
No, we can pay it incrementally. So we would send you a letter, let's say 30 to 60 days. I think the cost share agreement has language in there on when you need to be notified ahead of time. And then, 30 to 60 days ahead of, let's say, the beginning of the second year of the study, you folks would need to provide us a check for the next year's work. Or you can certainly give us all the money.
We had, the planning department had desperately tried to get the matching money in, the $750K. We talked to the mayor. Unfortunately, what happened with this past budget is the timing was off by about 1 week. The mayor had printed his budget and it went to the county council. These are all details of making sausage, but we did have Milton come over during the planning department budget hearing, and Milton explained the program, and our planning director requested from the council the $750,000 to match their money to move forward with the project here for Kahana Bay. And the county council, somebody from the county council would have had to sponsor that money because it wasn't a line item in the budget at the time, even though the mayor did support it and the planning director supported it. Nobody from the council stepped up and asked that that money went in, to go in as a supplement to the budget. The budget process went very quickly this year, and it was, they started reviewing it and it was pow before we had any more input. So we missed this cycle, unfortunately. We missed it by a month. I mean, if we had gotten that money, we could have begun this process now. So we're in the situation where we did approve, the Maui Planning Commission approved, different than the council, did approve Hololani. Hololani is committed financially to some amount of money to jumpstarting regional beach nourishment. I know Kahana Village has stepped up. We have a website, tri-isle.org, where you can contribute to the Kahana Bay Erosion Mitigation Study. They've put $4,000 in already. There are ways of, part of our discussion from 11 to 12, it's 5 of 11, really, is to have a strategic planning session talking about the money. We need to raise the money to match the core to begin this process, or we can do it independent of that. We can discuss. We could probably do it probably cheaper than the core process. Maybe not in the long run. For the homeowners, it would be cheaper to use the core, but the time frame would probably be longer. We probably can compress the time frame if we don't use the core, so that's the other option that we need to look at. But the bottom line is the county, Maui County, can be the sponsor, and we're willing to. The planning director and the mayor have said, yes, we will sponsor this project with the Corps of Engineers, but we need to come up with the money, and we need to get consensus from the boards of directors of all 9 condos and the Kama'aina property here to move forward. So part of this discussion is to have the representatives from the boards of directors begin discussions with their boards of directors about this as much as possible to look at our options for moving forward. Either a path with engaging the Corps of Engineers through the county of Maui and dealing with this project. Obviously, it'll potentially bring down the project cost by as much as $5 million to implement. Or to look at getting independent bids from individual coastal engineering contractors to totally focus on the regional beach nourishment project and look at that option and probably compressing the time by a year or two and implementing it sooner and probably maybe at the same costs or maybe a little larger cost or a little less cost. It's impossible to say right now. But we need a group of people and the condo boards to look at this, discuss this, and we need some committees. We need an outreach and education committee, we need a finance committee, we need, there's one other committee I know we need, a planning committee, you know, looking at, and we could look at the planning process here for going forward. Milton's pretty much talked about it in a
A
nutshell.
silver
but-
lining of not being funded by the county council this year is that we now, I think, have the ability to collectively look at the two approaches and the pros and the cons. And the decision and the power is really with you folks, how we proceed with this. Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in analyzing this benefit to cost to determine if there's a federal interest, you're looking at storm damage reduction, right?
Yes.
So the alternatives that you're analyzing, whether it's beach nourishment or armoring or anything else that's identified as an alternative, the idea is to look at its ability to reduce storm damages, and that's how the Corps.
Right, so
That's the
we
criteria.
look at what we call with and without project conditions. So without a core project in place, when we look at a 50-year planning horizon, so we say that our projects have a 50-year project life. So we say, okay, without a project in place, what conditions would exist for the next 50 years, and we quantify that, whether it be private property damage or any damages avoided that would come about as a result of our project. Then we look at our with project conditions and we say, okay, with a project in place, what are the expected damages on that same 50-year horizon? And the net of that would be the benefit to the county.
Exactly.
I want to say one thing in closing, and you know, I understand that the Corps is one of a couple of options that the county is looking at, and I would encourage all of you folks to have that discussion on what is in your best interest. You know, if the Corps is asked to assist, we will gladly assist. But you know, I would encourage you to, if you have a better option than the Corps, to go with whatever's in your best interest. I mean, I get paid, Tom gets paid no matter what. We're not in here to make a profit. We're here to assist. So whatever's in your best interest, I would encourage you to pursue. Tom, did you want to say a few words on the results of the?
One more question, and I think I know the answer, but I think it's important to understand. Is there any way that under the, if the county goes down to the section 103 process, is there any way, because of the emergency situation out here in Kahana Bay, can we accelerate that process and reduce the time between initiation and implementation, as opposed to going through like, oh, there might be a problem here in 10 years, yeah, let's begin the process. I mean, you understand, it's a different situation here. Can we compress that time to meet the needs of
let me answer that. There's two things here. As I mentioned, this is a very prescribed process. We need to look at economics, at costs, at real estate, the engineering side of it, and probably more importantly in terms of schedule, the NEPA side of it. So if this is going to require an EIS, there's no way to shortcut that. You know, it's going to take what it takes in terms of developing the EIS and getting the public input and everything else. So as much as anything, the NEPA requirement is going to drive the schedule. The other thing is availability of funding. So, you know, if you're going to talk about accelerating the process, which is very, very difficult to do given what I just said, the funding needs to be available when we need it. It can't be, well, wait till next year and I'll give you my next, or even on the federal side, you know, we can't be told, well, wait till next year and you'll get your next increment of federal money. So I guess the answer would be, Jim, no.
A pretty picture of the nasty erosion.
The study reach or something. But yeah, I had the privilege of being the coastal engineer on the study. And Milton's gone over most of the basics for the fact sheet. I just want to mention that there is a lot of existing data, which is a definite plus because we don't come in with much money to do this study. And it's just a recon look. It's only conceptual. It's just to see, do we have a project sponsor? And is there a potential federal interest out there? So it's the NED benefits that Milton talked about. So we looked at sheet pile wall, we looked at revetment, and we just looked at pure beach fill with periodic nourishment. And we didn't have to get down to the final numbers, the BC ratio of 1.2 or whatever. We just had to have some cost, and then the economist, who's retired, as you mentioned, he looked at storm damage as far as what is the potential damage to the upland development. We can also take some recreational benefits, but they can't be more than 50% of the project benefits. But it is a storm damage reduction project, and we had the benefit of being here in the fiscal year 15, so we had done regional sediment management studies all the way from up north down to Black Rock. So we had a good idea of the processes. USGS and UH have an extensive database for shoreline change. We have some wave data offshore, 30 years of hindcast data. So we looked at shoreline change, the beach profile, what it would take to provide maybe 10 foot of beach on an incremental basis along this whole reach here, and then what would the periodic nourishment be? And the question was, how often would that be? With structures, you wouldn't have to nourish very often. I know we think with those configurations, you get crescentic beach forms within each cell. So those are really stable landforms with headland kind of control that's provided by the T-head groins. So very little nourishment if you do this complete project. Upfront cost, yes, but one of the biggest headaches is having to go back every 10, 15 years and find money and re-nourish these projects and find the sand and to go through all the environmental permitting every time you have to re-nourish. So we looked at those 3 different plans. When we get into feasibility, we'll be looking at every coastal engineering application, breakwaters, maybe backpassing sand. If it goes to one end, we bring it back or whatever, and we'd look at the T-head groins also. So basically we found that there was justification to go into the next phase. So Milton, like Milton said, we're waiting on additional assurance from a sponsor that we can move forward. And I guess another big point that was mentioned, the Corps might come up with a sheet pile being the cheapest alternative, most NED benefits. That's what our selected plan is, but we're not telling you to build a seawall. We know there's issues with that. There could be, a lot of non-interest in doing a hardened feature. So we look to that locally preferred plan and that incremental cost that would have to be paid for by the non-federal sponsor for getting you the project that you want. We're not going to come out here with sheet pile if you don't want sheet pile. So that's kind of the bottom line. Side seawall. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. We'll keep going. Anyone who needs to take a break, please take a break, okay? We'd like to get to the strategic planning session. I'd like to present an option for, I kind of force-fed this. I had Moffitt and Nickel, who is part of our consulting team for the sand study offshore. I said, please, and Rising Tide Engineering, we asked them to put together foreshortened timeline, but to look at the key elements, and obviously you can't see this here. Let me talk about it. But this would be a project component timeline if we didn't go with the core. And the timing may be, let me back up here so the camera can get on there a little bit. But basically we need to, September 2006, 2017, May, September 2018 to September 2018, or the end of 2018. We need to, these would be going with a private firm to do the work as opposed to the Corps of Engineers. If we just want to do regional beach nourishment, I know you can't read it, I'll just talk out loud to you. But we would have to, between now and November 1, develop a request for funding proposal, put it out to bid. That would be the scope of this entire project, or major piece of the project, and get it out to bid for private consultants. By the end of this year, December 30th, we would award the engineering entitlement contract here. So then we would, at that point, we would complete engineering studies and entitlement studies being permitting. If we could parallel engineering and the various EIS, the environmental impact statement studies, the biology, some of the archaeology, the shoreline certifications, anything else offshore we need to do, we would do it all within next year, maybe slip into the following year. That's a compressed time frame. One good thing about both the Corps and the EIS process is we have found sand. That's a major component of the environmental impact statement that would need to be done, the sand prospecting. We have completed the sand prospecting. We would continue to refine it and all that, but that would be part of the environmental impact statement. So we've got a good jump on that at this point. So then from there, if we could, with the county's help, with the state's help, with federal help, if we could expedite the permit process, rather than doing them one after another, if we could somehow parallel this with the county and state and federal greasing the skids, we could potentially get the project going in 2018 or 2019, something like that. So that's kind of a timeline from a private consulting point of view. Any comments on that? So I want to throw that out. But that would be funded by you guys, by anything that the condos, anything that the council could come up with, anything the state could come up with, etc., without the Corps of Engineers. So that would be the same project, accelerated, and hopefully relieve some of the condos here from having to continue to protect properties, minus the cost by accelerating all of this process, minus the cost of yearly protection of what's going on out here.
Jim,
Yes.
at this meeting, are we trying to encourage stakeholders, the 9 stakeholders, to volunteer a commitment of money to make a proposal to the county to then also contribute money? I'm just trying to get a feel for...
The question is, are we encouraging them to commit money? We can't ask anyone to commit money today. The idea was to get the boards of directors representatives here to begin that discussion, to create a financial management organization or a skeleton of a financial management committee to look at some of these issues. Larry has dealt with this extensively. This isn't my job. It is not my job. I cannot take the burden from one person in the planning department managing this whole project. Corps of Engineers would have an entire team doing this. We need assistance from the condos. We need sweat equity as much as possible. We need commitments. Yes, we do need financial commitments. It's got to be a private, public partnership. Obviously, the very first step, and at the very beginning I said this will probably be a brainstorming session, because any strategic planning, anything with this many stakeholders, we have to brainstorm, and we'll continue to brainstorm, and we all have our own opinions, and we have different entities here that need to come together. But we really need to understand the key project elements and dependencies to expedite project planning from the permit side of view, the funding, and the completion. We need to identify committees to be formed. I don't know what those committees are. I have an idea of what I think needs to be done, but we may need more. And we need to identify volunteers to work with the county staff to begin project planning and research. You know, the county is willing to add some more sweat equity to get this going. And, you know, and then to identify a draft planning process. That's kind of what the Corps can do for us in the next 50K of project management plan, or we can do it independently. We have other environmental impact statements that we can do it. So these are really, it's really a planning committee, a funding committee, I think an education and outreach committee, like why isn't our state representative here? Why isn't our county council member here? How do we lobby them? All that outreach, all our council members that need to be, they need to be educated. You know, we need more materials to educate people on this.
More voices,
You know.
really. I mean, they hear from us a lot, but it's more, you know, there's a strength in hearing from the community itself and from a variety of people and a variety of perspectives, especially if there's a common goal.
Yes.
So, but these things need to be debated, I think, amongst all the boards of directors of each of the condos. It can't be instantaneous. I don't think anyone here can commit resources, or, I mean, we certainly can volunteer. It would be great if we can get some commitments. I mean, some of you people have more time than others. Some of you people have been at each of these meetings. We need to, you know, Jim Foster is YouTubing this thing so we can reach more stakeholders here.
The few
How else
examples
do we
we've
do it,
seen
you know?
be successful in Maui, for example, the very small project that was done at Stable Road was done because the homeowners organized themselves. They formed the Stable Road Beach Restoration Foundation, which was a nonprofit, which then could keep everybody organized and deal with the funding of the project. Napili Bay has a Napili Bay and Beach Restoration, or Napili Bay and Beach Foundation. They've done some beach work and some stream restoration work. Similarly, they've organized the multiple condominium stakeholders along that bay to drive those projects and prioritize those projects and go after grant funding for those projects. So I would see something like that being very valuable here. Where if the group collectively decides that working with the Corps through the county is the best option, then great.
It's the most professional.
If the group decides they want to self-organize and manage the project on their own through a nonprofit organization that you form and choose a project manager and fund it, then that's a legitimate option, and it should be driven by you folks. Really, that's the hope. That's
Either way, we need money. We need money to get this thing going.
and an EIS. Money in an EIS.
Can we,
I'd like to
Milton has a comment.
offer up just one more option, and we haven't talked about this, the other way that the Corps can participate in this project. So we have an authority called Interagency and International Support, which is basically us doing work on a cost reimbursable basis. In other words, as an example, the county would just pay us to do the work. So we would bypass the feasibility study, the whole federal interest. Essentially, we would be like contractors to the county. So we would scope out the work based on exactly what you want. You want beach nourishment, we'll scope it out, give you an estimate for design, environmental documentation, and if you choose to use this again for construction. The only requirement for that may be a stumbling block is that there needs to be some federal money in the mix that be transferred to us. It's by law, the Economy Act, to take us out of competition with the private sector. If there's some federal money in the mix, there's an assumption of a federal interest in the project. So you folks would need to go and find some federal money. As a rule of thumb, we say maybe 10% to transfer over to us. We would execute a memorandum of agreement and a support agreement with the county. and essentially you folks pay us to do everything for you.
Is there an example of that somewhere, and where the federal monies came from in that case?
Not for this particular kind of work. I
Okay.
mean, we've done it for navigation projects. We do a lot of other type work, like technical studies. We've done work with other federal agencies, but you know, it would be a matter of executing a memorandum of agreement with the county and a broad MOA that says we can provide planning, engineering, construction services to the county. And then you would just write us a letter, we would provide you a scope of work with an estimate for, let's say, design and or the environmental piece of it. And then money would be transferred and we would produce whatever it is that you tell us you want.
So we've gotten everywhere except for where we're meeting next Friday.
Right. At what time?
And what any other final comments?
Basically what this is about.
So Friday, 9 o'clock over here, whoever get my number, if the mother change, call me back.
22,
Got it.
on 22nd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are these gonna be closed meetings or?
Do I,
No, not in the beginning.
I just
shall we
want-
vote for Mike? Okay, you're unanimously, they voted to include you, Mike.
Everyone, tell them, and everybody gonna
This
take
is
it.
Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Mahalo, Junior.
Thank you, Jim.